It's a very warm welcome to all our viewers and welcome to a new episode of Africa Today, our program bringing you all the latest news from the African continent. I'm Angie Meher joining you with today's edition of the show, and as usual we begin with a look at some of the news making the headlines. This time we look at news coming from home, where leaders from across Africa and beyond are gathering in the Egyptian city of Aswan for the 5th edition of the Aswan Forum for Sustainable Peace and Development, with a focus on navigating the continent's progress amid a challenging global landscape. The two-day forum held from the 19th to the 20th of October under the theme "A World in Flux, a Continent in Motion" was opened Sunday with a recorded address by the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. He welcomed participants to the platform, which was launched during Egypt's chairmanship of the African Union in 2019 and since has become a key venue for discussing the continent's security and development issues. President el-Sisi noted this year's forum convenes at a critical time marked by the international community's failure to confront major humanitarian crises, growing global polarization, and failure to meet commitments on debt relief and climate finance. We're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by our guest for the afternoon, Her Excellency Ambassador Sou'ad Shalaby, the former assistant to the Foreign Minister, who is currently at the Aswan Forum. A very good afternoon to you, Madam Ambassador.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador, for your time this afternoon. Tell us a bit about the significance of the Aswan Forum as, of course, a platform promoting African-led solutions to issues like climate change as well as development changes, as well as the issues that are being witnessed in the region as a whole, ma'am.
As you know, this is the 5th edition of the Aswan Forum.
Yes.
And this year is taking place in Aswan itself, because it is the representative of the city that represents Africa to Egyptians. And of course, the highlight of this forum is the African peace and development. Yes. At the same time. Mm-hmm. As you know, that Africa is home for at least half of the fastest growing global economies. That is why in the last few years there was an evolution of frameworks of sustainable peace and development. That means that there has been sustainable goals and there has been agenda for peace, and the forum is mainly accomplishing the concrete actions of the recommendations of the heads of states and governments and leaders of Africa and the regional organizations and the international organizations. So we find here around 300 participants.
Right.
And it was inaugurated by both President Sisi and Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and inaugurated by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, Dr. Badr Abdelghati, and many ministers and high officials from different countries.
Indeed.
This edition and the 5th edition that preceded is organized by the Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping and Peace Building, mm-hmm. and it is it's an implementing agency in cooperation with the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and all other donors.
Yes, indeed. Madam Ambassador, let me ask you quickly now, the theme for this year's edition of this forum is entitled "A World in Flux, a Continent in Motion." How does this, in your opinion, reflect, the African continent's changing dynamics? Specifically, what are some of the practical steps that are being discussed in order to keep, motion and development sustainable for the African continent?
Well, as you know, that there has been many conflicts that have faced many countries in the African continent.
Yes.
And that is in itself a big challenge for the development process. So you have to to achieve peace before you achieve the development.
Yes.
That is why the development, the sustainable development achievements are not happening as much as we were wanting, especially that all the not the donations, but all the financial commitments are going, that were supposed to go for development, are going to sustain peace and durable peace in the regions that have conflicts. So the challenges are big, but we are always looking at African solutions for African problems. That means that the agenda for peace is marching hand in hand with the agenda for development.
Absolutely. Indeed. Madam Ambassador, now the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres had called for stronger African representation in global institutions. What progress is being made towards this goal, and how important is it, especially to have a more inclusive representation of the African continent?
Yes, of course, there has to be inclusion of these because usually the conflicts that are happening in Africa are extending, and are the root causes of conflicts are always happening during the time when the development process is happening. That is why Guterres have involved all the international community in order to be there present for the not only to the peace process but also the development process, in order to be able to achieve the development goals. There has to be a policy, there has to be operational guidance, there has to be programs and projects that ensure that sustainable development, especially in the field of climate change, in the field of renewable energy, in the field of ICT and technology, and the AI that is happening so fast in the modern world and in the Western world. It has to be also involving Africa and the South cooperation, South-South cooperation with African countries, in order to have them in the same development of the Western world, whether it is regional or national or international.
Absolutely.
And of course, civil society and think tanks have to be working together with the Western think tanks and civil society.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Your Excellency Ambassador Sou'ad Shalaby, the former Assistant to the Foreign Minister. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time and your insight, and for joining us on today's edition of Africa Today. And we move to more news, and as part of efforts to enhance Egypt's presence in international economic forums, the Egyptian Commercial Service participated in the Women 20 or W20 Summit to strengthen the African cooperation on women's empowerment. We have more details in this report.
As part of efforts to enhance Egypt's presence in international economic forums, the Egyptian Commercial Service participated in the Women 20 Summit. The summit, one of the official engagement groups of the G20, chaired this year by the aims to promote gender equality and women's economic empowerment through policy recommendations presented to the leaders. Egypt was represented by Commercial Councillor Ihab Salahuddin, head of the Egyptian Commercial Office, and the Egyptian African Businessmen Association, following a proposal by the Egyptian Mission in Pretoria to invite leading Egyptian businesswomen to the event. Minister for Commercial Affairs Dr. Abdelaziz Sharif stated that Egypt's participation reflects its presence in global economic platforms that support sustainable development, women's empowerment, and African cooperation. He noted that this marks the third time Egypt has been invited to the related events, following its participation in the 2023 Brazil and 2024 India summits, underscoring the growing international recognition of Egypt's active role on both regional and global levels.
Still with more news, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, warned that sub-Saharan African governments are increasingly turning to local banks to fund their budgets, paying higher borrowing costs at homes than abroad and putting pressure on their domestic leaders. We have more details in this story.
Sub-Saharan African governments are increasingly turning to local banks to fund their budgets, paying higher borrowing costs at home than abroad and putting new pressure on domestic lenders. The International Monetary Fund warned that in its latest regional economic outlook released during the IMF and World Bank annual meetings in Washington. The fund said the domestic cost of capital remains elevated across the region, adding that many local financial markets are underdeveloped, fragmented and illiquid, with high transactions costs and lending spread. The IMF noted that new domestic borrowing is now significantly more expensive than external borrowing in several countries, as governments rely more heavily on local banks. Funding costs are rising and private sector investment is being squeezed. The report highlighted that domestic banks' holdings of government debt are large and growing faster in sub-Saharan Africa than in the rest of the world. This, if warned, risks creating a feedback loop in which strained public finances undermine bank stability, further triggering credit and worsening fiscal pressures. After years of being locked out of global capital markets due to high borrowing costs and economic uncertainty, some African countries have cautiously started returning to international bond markets since 2024, but many remain wary of falling back into debt traps.
Still with our news, climate change is intensifying water scarcity across the African continent, whilst also worsening issues related to drought. Despite a brief uptick in rainfall across the continent, critical water shortages are persistent, particularly in major river basins such as the Zambezi River. We have more details in this story.
Change is intensifying water scarcity across Africa while also exacerbating droughts. Despite a brief uptick in rainfall across the continent, critical water shortages persist, particularly in major river basins such as the Zambezi. The diminished rainfall over the past year had led to reduced river flows, triggering severe ecological, economic and humanitarian impacts. This trend is projected to continue. Robert Atogaza, the farmer, said that they had a very beautiful forest, very beautiful wetlands, but because of several pressures, these areas were all damaged. Africa's average surface temperatures have risen steadily across all regions, with southern Africa experiencing the highest increases. According to the World Meteorological Organization, projections indicate a rise of up to 4 degrees Celsius by 2050.
And with this final news report, we wrap up today's edition of Africa Today. You were in the company of myself, Angie Meher. Many thanks for watching.